Thank you very much. The most daunting thing about this is the 18-minute thing. You know you're here for a while. There's no running. You can't leave after 4 minutes. That was it. That was the whole plan. I don't even like getting a haircut. Have you ever been in a chair and all that? You're halfway through the haircut and you just want to run for it. I've actually done that. I was 2/3 of the way through, and I don't know, the mirrors or something, all the thing. I started getting dizzy. I was like, okay, I'm done. And she goes, what? I haven't even done this side. I said, yeah, I'll do it. That's okay. I'm out of here. So if I run off, that's why. I'm going to tell you how failure has helped me in my life, and why I have no fear of failure. And I'm encouraging you not to also. One time I was whenever we have a movie, we try to go back to Rhode Island. I do a screening in my hometown. And I invite all my friends. We see everybody, we have a ball. So one day I was there, and after the party and at the end of the night, one of my friends who was the valedictorian of our high school, and he was also captain of the hockey team, and he went to Yale. And then he was the captain of the hockey team at Yale, and he came up to me and he'd had a couple drinks, and he said, "You are one lucky guy." He says, "You had the ability to fail, and I never did." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He says, "You could fail, because I have to tell you, I was a colossal failure all through high school. Didn't do well. Pretty much everything I attempted didn't work out one way or another. And yet, somehow I ended up becoming a writer, director, making movies, and having the time of my life." And he was right. What happened was, when I turned 24 years old, it suddenly occurred to me, I wish I had been a writer. I majored in English in college. I wish I had majored in English. My major in college, by the way, was accounting. And the reason it was accounting was because when I started college, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I had high math boards, and relatively high. They're, the high sixes, say. And so the first week of school, I met with my advisor, and my advisor said, "So what's your major?" I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Well, you have good math boards. How about accounting?" I said, "Okay." And I was an accounting major for 4 years. That's all the thought that went into it. And I did really poorly, again. And got out, became a salesman, didn't do great. And now I turned 24 years old, and I don't know what happened. I don't know if my brain just grew late or something. But all of a sudden I thought, geez, I wish I'd become a writer. I think I could do that. I was a good storyteller with my friends, and I suddenly had an interest in reading. Everything was becoming more interesting to me. And I told my friends and family, I say, I'm going to be a writer. And nobody stopped me. Nobody said, "What, are you crazy? No, don't do that," because the odds of making it as a writer, I was growing up, I was in Rhode Island, and I never had met a writer. I didn't know what it meant to be a writer, but I got it in my head I wanted to be a writer. And the odds of me making it were, not good, very, very poor. But I was so used to failure, I didn't care. I had nothing to lose. I'd failed a lot. I was okay with it. It wasn't the worst thing in the world. My buddy, on the other hand, who was valedictorian and went to Yale, his world went like this. It narrowed like a bottleneck. Like, his possibilities got tighter and tighter as he went on. When he was graduating from Yale, he told me, he said there were like 3 or 4 things he could do. He could be a banker, could be a lawyer. When he started Yale, he could have tried to be a doctor. And if he had gone off that track, the people around him would have said, no. You're doing great. Don't do that. He couldn't just say one day, "That's it, I'm going to move out and be a writer." People would have said, "Are you nuts? You got everything, man. Go to business school. Go to law school. Do something." Nobody tried to talk me into staying or going to any law schools. I realized, and he realized, and he told me that night, he said, by the way, he was very successful banker, but I got the feeling he hadn't followed his heart, because he got on a track that just narrowed and narrowed, whereas my world was an oyster. I could have done anything. And whenever I wanted to do, it's like nobody would have stopped me. I could have tried anything. And also, as I said, I was very used to failure. I was fine with failure. I'd failed a lot. It doesn't hurt that bad. And it had steered me in a certain direction. And what happened was then I decided to start writing, so I did. And I ended up going to Columbia University for creative writing. And you say, well, how'd you go to, for grad school? And you say, if you were such a failure, how'd you go to Columbia? I don't know. I really don't know. My grades were horrible. I submitted like 50 pages I'd written, and they took me, and it was a miracle. And so I went to Columbia, and again, I wasn't afraid of failure. I would submit things every week. I'd write stories. I'd submit them. People rip them apart. This is horrible. This has been, but I was learning. I kept getting better and better and better. And I remember there was a guy in my class. He was by far the best writer in the program, by far. He handed in one story. We were like blown away. It was a masterpiece. It was the only story he handed in 3 years in grad school. He was a perfectionist, couldn't handle criticism, couldn't handle the fear that people would criticize him or that he would fail in any way. Whereas I didn't care. I'm tossing things in every week, like read this, read that. What do you think of this? How about that one, And I kept getting better and better and better and better and better. And he didn't. He never improved because he couldn't handle failure. I remember we were interviewed once, and somebody said, my brother, by the way, was similar. He wasn't quite as much of a disaster as I was in high school, but we weren't, we were the last guys in Rhode Island that you would expect would go off and make movies. And somebody asked us, why you guys? Why do you think you guys? And we said, I don't think anyone else tried, I didn't run into a lot of brothers from Rhode Island out in LA, like, you guys are doing it too, you too, huh? It's like we were the only ones who tried because we weren't afraid. We had nothing to lose. And I think the reason I'm speaking about this tonight, and I gave this some thought before I came here, is because you guys are my friend. You're the valedictorian. You guys are super high achievers. And in fact, you grew up in an era where failing is really hidden from you. Like my kids, when they went to school, in grammar school, if they had a game, a kickball game or soccer game out in the yard, there were no winners and no losers. They come home, they say, Dad, we scored 9 goals, they scored none. They said it was a tie. I was like, well, that's ridiculous. It's absurd. They're protecting, they didn't want people to feel what it's like to lose. But that's the greatest lesson, to lose, to get things wrong, to lose, and to know also what it's like to win. But if you lose or you fail, then when you win, it teaches you compassion. It gives you wisdom. It makes you a better person. You have to look at failure like this. Failure is your friend. It was my friend. Like, the reason we succeeded, if every single person in Rhode Island who really wanted to be a writer had moved out to LA and tried it, I wouldn't be the one standing here. But they didn't. They were afraid. They were afraid of failure. So if you can overcome that fear of failure, your world opens up hugely. You guys can do anything. But you're not used to failure, so it's hard at first. You think, oh, God, I don't know about that. I don't think I'm going to try. Try it. Doesn't hurt to fail. But it also, failing is like a compass. It puts you in the right direction. It points you. It changes where you're facing. If you fail at this, you go over here. If you fail at that, you go over here. When I decided to be a writer, it was the first time I ever really, really wanted to do something. But if I had succeeded at something earlier, I'd probably be a salesman today. If I had been a great salesman, I never would have thought this, but failure kept shifting it around until finally writing was standing in front of me and I committed to it. Okay, let's see what I got here. Still says 17 minutes. I don't know how that could be. what I do is actually, being a writer is all about failing. You know, if you read a book, you probably think, oh, I can never write a book. You see a book, you say, how can I ever write a book? It's 350 pages, nobody could do that. You're looking at it wrong. You're thinking somebody sat down and wrote 350 pages. No, they wrote a page at a time and they kept fixing, editing, throwing out. Writing is all about making mistakes, failing, fixing, making mistakes, failing, fixing. But you would always rather write 5 crappy pages than no pages, because those lousy pages, there'll be something in there that you could work with. You could end up with a page or two. Whenever we write a screenplay, by the time we get to page 40, we end up throwing out 25 pages. And we're down to 15, but we got 15 good pages. Were those other pages a waste? No. They weren't failings. They were getting us to where we needed to be. I'll give you a good example. There's a joke in Dumb and Dumber. Thank you. And there's a joke in Dumb and Dumber where they're driving along and they make the bet. And Jim Carrey says, I'll bet you this, and Jeff Daniels says, I don't bet. He goes, what do you mean you don't bet? He goes, I don't bet. He goes, I'll bet you I can get you betting by the end of the day. He goes, no, don't bet. He goes, I'll give you 3-1 odds I can get you betting by the end of the day. He goes, no, 5-1 odds I'll get you betting by, no, 10-1. He goes, you're wrong. Well, originally, that was the joke. And Jim Carrey goes, gotcha. But then, as we looked at that over weeks and months, we realized, no, he wouldn't even understand he made a bet. That's the better joke, you know? Well, that first joke wasn't a failure. It got us to the great joke. And that's what all writing is. And in fact, that's what music is. I'm going to show you something really quickly here. This is the Rolling Stones, okay? This was filmed in 1968. And it's, somebody filmed them writing a song. And you'll see, it looks like any of you sitting in a room having just picked up a guitar for the first time. Can we get a quick look at that? They're doing there. They're completely lost, as all artists are when they begin an artistic endeavor. You're winging it, you're failing left and right. And if they had walked away that day and said, that would have been a failure. But it wasn't a failure because they stuck with it, they kept working it, they found other ways of doing it, and that song became this song. Please allow me to introduce myself. I'm a man of wealth and taste. I've been around for a long anyway, we know that song, I hope, right? Okay, so it's a smash, great song. That's what you know, Weeknd does. That's what Kendrick Lamar does. They start with crap, and they don't quit, and they're not afraid of failing. If you're afraid of failing, you can't create. It's all about overcoming that fear. You're gonna be looking at whatever you do in life, it's gonna start off feeling like a failure. But the only way it's a failure is if you quit on it. If you pivot, change, mix it up, then that's how you succeed. Has anybody here ever heard of a thing called the Trafo Data 8008? The Trafo Data 8008. Anybody hear of that? That was Bill Gates' first company. Colossal failure. That was a company that was going to end road congestion. They had a machine that could read traffic tapes and process data to end road congestion. Didn't work. He pivoted. He tried something else. He didn't quit at that point. All inventors, like Thomas Edison said, I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. That's how life is. You ever hear of a guy named Nick Woodman? Nick Woodman started a company, two companies that went bankrupt. He had raised $4 million from investors, all lost. Then he started GoPro. Everybody made their money back, and he's a billionaire. Everybody fails. The Wright brothers failed. They knew when they started trying to figure out how to fly a plane, it was going to crash a lot. They knew. You can't just once get up. They were going to crash a lot. But every time they crashed, they studied the data. Those flights were failures, but they got them to that successful flight. And we're still they're flying the exact same way that they taught us how. NASA, Mars last week, found water on Mars. You look at that and say, that's amazing. Do you know that was 100,000 failures in the making? You know how many times they have to fail to keep changing to get that far? Abe Lincoln, 8 times he lost elections. He ran for senator in 1854, lost. Tried to get the VP nomination in 56, lost. Ran for Senate again in 58, lost. 1860 became president. Steve Jobs, you ever hear of a thing called the Lisa? The Lisa was a computer he invented in 1980 or 81. Colossal disaster. It cost, at that time, $10,000, which is equivalent to $24,000 today. Nobody wanted it. It was pointless. He ended up leaving the company over that and eventually came back and made Apple what it is today. Mark Zuckerberg says, successful people not only learn from their mistakes, but actually spend most of their time making mistakes. Failing builds character, and it builds calluses. If you attempt a few things and fail, you will get over it. You will get used to it, and you won't be afraid of it. You will grow from it. You'll learn what you did wrong. It will correct you, and it will make you a better person. And this is the final thing I'll say. If you don't embrace failure, or if you can't overcome your fear of failure, then you'll never be true to your heart. Because unless you're very, very lucky, most of the things that are really deep down inside that scare the hell out of you are the things that you want to do the most. But if you play it safe, you won't ever fail, but you'll be living somebody else's dreams. Thank you.